last class I discussed about the Martensite transformation. For last 2 lectures I have discussed Martensite transformations. I told you different features of Martensite transformations, and I am going to tell you the several points before I discuss. Let me see whether I have it, just a minute, I may not. So, the most important point is that Martensite is basically brittle, and also it requires certain kind of heat treatment to transform it to a more ductile structure, and this is what is known as tempering in the literature. Tempering of Martensites is very important, because Martensite is so brittle that even if you just have a steel sample quench in water, it will form a crack. You cannot use such a kind of material in the real applications. So, this tempering of Martensites is very it is nothing but a heat treatment. It normally done heat treating these Martensites, which form from 100 degrees to about 700 degrees Celsius temperature, depending on the requirement in the industry. And these are not done in one go, these are done in different stages. So, therefore, when I will discuss about the microstructure evolution and changes in the microstructure, I am going to talk about different stages, and then I will finally write down on the board for your information, so that you do not forget. As you know, Martensite is what? This is a body center tetragonal structure with lot of strain and lot of what to say, highly supersaturated solution also. Because if I take a steel austenite of suppose 0.8 or 1.2% carbon, what will happen? This austenite can take lot of carbon, but when you transform the austenite to Martensite, it cannot take so much of carbon. So, therefore, whatever extra carbon is remaining inside Martensite is basically beyond its saturation. So, these are all known as supersaturated carbon. So, this supersaturated carbon along with the defects in the Martensites, that actually has a role, a strong role in the tempering of Martensites. So, first thing, the first stage of tempering of Martensite is known as stage 1. Stage 1 is normally done at from up to 100 degrees Celsius temperature. That is, if you heat the steel Martensite about 100 degrees Celsius temperature, 80, 90 or 100 degrees Celsius temperature, and what will happen? The few things happens in this. First thing which will happen is that all the extra carbon, supersaturated carbon which is present in the Martensites, they will segregate on the dislocations. That is what you see in this picture. These are the carbon on which, these are the sites dislocations on these or twins on which carbon atoms will segregate. Why they will segregate? Well, that is not difficult to understand. In dislocation, if you know as edge dislocation has an extra plane of atom, and that means what? You have a extra plane of atom is not present below the dislocation plane or below the slip plane rather. Okay. So, because of that, carbon atom can easily go and sit there, and by sitting there it can reduce the strain around the dislocation. That is very routine. You can find any mechanical metallurgy book, you can understand that. Similarly, if the carbon atom sits on the twin plane and the distorted twin plane, it can reduce the distortion. So, that is why at the beginning it is very simple. At the beginning it is like a recovery process in the whole heat treatment in case of steels, where you deform and then heat it high temperature, it undergoes recovery. Same thing, similar thing happens here. The Martensite relieve strain by putting these carbon atoms, segregating carbon atoms, the dislocation and the defects. And this is how it can actually supersaturation can be reduced, because the dislocations are the defects. If the carbon atom goes out of the unit cell, and then supersaturation in the unit cell can be reduced. This is very simple. So, first thing, if you want to reduce the strain inside the matrix, inside these Martensites, you heat it up to 100 degrees Celsius temperature. Most of the strains, residual strains can be relieved. Now, second stage, this is known as stage 1, as I have written here, stage 1, 100 degrees Celsius. Second stage which normally happens is from 100 to 250 degrees Celsius temperature. This is the stage in which a new phase forms, and the name of the phase is epsilon carbide. As you know, cementite is also carbide. It is a composition of Fe3C, iron 3 carbon, very fixed stoichiometric compound. But this carbide which forms if you heat this Martensite to 250 up to 250 degrees Celsius temperature is known as epsilon carbide. it has a composition of Fe 2.4, Fe 2.4, sorry, let me write it properly, Fe 2.4 C. This is unsaturated carbide, right. Carbon concentration should have been, sorry, the iron concentration should have been more, it should be Fe 3 C, but instead of that is Fe 2.0 C. That is because the availability of carbon in this martensite is so high that it easily form. Well, that is one reason. Second is that the epsilon carbide is very easy to form, very easy to nucleate. You have all lots of defect space and dislocations and twins, and carbon atoms are already segregated onto each of these at for stage 1. So, next stage this carbon atom reacts with the iron and form this epsilon carbide. And you know, if carbon concentration is very low, so less than about 0.15 percentage, there will be not much epsilon carbide formation, because sufficient number of carbon atom is not available to form the epsilon carbide. Only when the carbon atom is beyond 0.28 percentage, epsilon carbide easily forms. Epsilon carbide as compared to Fe3C has hexagonal crystal structure, it is a HCP structure. Okay. Not only that, it bears a very good orientation relationship with the martensite alpha prime phase, and here the martensites as the close plug plane of martensite, that 011 plane or 110 plane of martensites becomes parallel with the close plug planes of the epsilon carbide, similarly the close plug directions. So, that is what actually happens. So, the stage 2 basically you are forming the epsilon carbide. By forming epsilon carbide, further supersaturation of carbon is reduced. Not only that, because you are forming a new phase which is strain free, reduce the strain of the matrix very nicely. So, then comes the stage 3. Stage 3 happens at higher temperatures, normally at 250 to 350 degrees Celsius temperature, that is what is shown in the slide. This is stage 3 as you see here. Stage 3 okay, is very important. Stage 3 is very critical for the most of the martensite tempering, and almost all the steels you see in the market, at least they will undergo heat transformation, heat treatment till stage 3. Why? Because in stage 3 written austenite is transformed into alpha, okay, or it transforms into perlite depending on what kind of carbon concentration is there in the austenite. Normal written austenites are present, these are the white regions are the written austenites. So, written austenite as I told you is very dangerous. Why? Because written austenite will always have the tensile stress inside it. So, the moment you put into the component into the actual practice, the cracks will level up and steel will fracture. So, therefore, you need to transform the written austenite into something else which has a lower propensity to crack formation. So, one way of transformation is transforming written austenite is to form alpha phase, and that is what is done by heating up to 350 degrees Celsius temperature. So, you have already formed epsilon carbide in stage 2, and then in stage 3 you whatever remaining written austenite, whatever austenite is retained, that is transformed into the alpha iron or the perlite depending on the carbon concentration in austenite. Now, stage 4, which happens at higher temperature, it can go from 350 to 700 degrees Celsius temperature, is optional, is normally not done for all the steels martensite samples. What actually happens in stage 4? Stage 4 is characterized by formation of cementite. It is another carbide basically, and not only cementite forms directly from martensites, basically the moment cementite form martensites, whatever is remaining nothing but a alpha phase, BCC alpha phase. So, you lose all the strength, correct, it becomes like a perlite, but not exactly a perlite, but microstructure consisting of alpha and cementite both, okay, two separate entities presents. So, martensites completely get transformed into this Fe3C and alpha. That is what happens there. Not only that, if you keep this steel at this temperature for long time means sufficiently long time, I mean to say, if you keep this for sufficiently long time, what is going to happen? This cementite, which will come as a plates at the beginning, will undergo spheroidization treatment. What is known as the cementites, which will form as a plates at the beginning, will become spheroids, or will become like a circular things or spherical of the phase. That is what is shown here. These are all the spheroid cementites, and this is routine in the high temperature tempering treatment of the Martensites. So, you have seen that there are stage 1 to stage 4 on the Martensite transformation depending on the temperature you use. I have not talked about time. Time can vary from 1 day to about 3 days, depends on what you actually want to get. But if you are industrial, if you are in industry and you want to temper the Martensites, depending on the strength level or ductility level of your component, where you are going to use this material, you can actually choose any of the stage. You can actually stop the heat treatment either stage 2, stage 3, or you can go up to stage 4, but stage 4, as I told you, is not normally done. So, in a nutshell, you can choose the temperature of transformations depending on your need, depending on your stuff, but these are things you should know. As you know, in the stage 2, because stage 1 is nothing but stress relieving treatment. So, you do not get completely out of the brittleness zone or brittleness regime, you have still a problem of brittleness. But in stage 2, as you form a cement, you form the epsilon carbide, and you can relax lot of strain, and so you can bring in ductility into the transform Martensite. Stage 3 obviously is very critical, as we told you, austenite gets transformed into alpha or perlite depending on the carbon concentration. So, stage 3 is very critical to reduce all the brittleness. So, most of the Martensites you find in the plain carbon steel are actually must be heat treated until stage 2 to 3, that is up to 350 degrees Celsius temperature, but stage 4 is optional, as I told you. So, thus this is in a nutshell is what you should remember in your in the things. So, now I am going to write down what are the things happens in the board, and so that you do not forget, and I also do not forget for the sake of understanding, and then close this chapter on Martensites. So, tempering of Martensites done at different stages. I told you in the as a function of temperature. So, tempering of Martensite, this is to reiterate the fact first one is stage 1, it happens at temperature from room temperature to 100 degrees Celsius temperature, is nothing but a strain relieving strain relieves and basically carbon segregates on defects, mean dislocations and twins. And stage 2 is happens from 100 to 250 degrees Celsius temperature, we form epsilon carbide. This is known as epsilon carbide. I have given the formula, it is a non-stoichiometric carbide which forms, and carbon concentration, supersaturation of carbon is reduced obviously because of that. Stage 3 very critical, this is what happens at 250 to 350 degrees Celsius, written austenite transform, or rather I write down transformations of written austenite transformation of written austenite happens, that is very critical because written austenite is not good at all for the Martensite. Last stage is stage 4, which happens at high temperatures from 350 to 700. These temperature regimes depends on the steel composition. Okay. Here the cementite forms, that means the whole martensitic structure is dissolved, cementite forms, and it can actually undergo spheroidization of cementite, spheroidization of cementite can happen. So, these are the 4 different stages, as I told you, which happens during the transformation time. So, stage 1 to stage 4 is optional, as I told in the lecture, but these 3 stages are required. Well, in case of alloy steels, you can form other carbides. If you have a moly present, if you have a suppose chromium present, then you can have form those carbides also in addition to the epsilon carbides. So, that is the basically aspect of the tempering of martensites, which is routinely done. So, now I am going to go back to the slides, and whatever time I have, about 10 minutes or so, I am going to start the discussion on the last topic, that is the last topic on austenitic transformation, that is on austenite to bainite transformation. Okay, so I will just show you few microstructures and try to explain things happens. Bainite is again a unique microstructure. The name is given by the scientist E.C. Bain, and E.C. Bain actually discovered the Bain distortion for the explanation of Martensite transformation. So, to honor that, we have this name is given to the unique transformation. This is relatively new, and it happens in a unique manner. Well, let me first tell you. So, we have discussed the diffusion controlled Pauli transformation, diffusionless Martensite transformations. Now, we are discussing a transformation for which we do not know how this happens. This can happen both this can happen in such a way that both these transformation mechanisms can work. So, this is the bainite, typical bainite you see here, it is like a feathery bainite, it is just like a leaf, and within that leaf you have cementite and alpha iron. The cementites are the red color thing. So, I am putting, and this one is alpha. So, therefore, this is actually like a tree bunch, sorry, this is like a tree leaves, in which if you have a tree leaves like this, in which these are actually the cementite, and remaining parts, these dot things are actually alpha. So, this is one such morphology which is observed. Now, let me just go through it. There are two types of bainites which forms normally. One is known as the lower bainite or upper bainite. So, what is the difference between lower and upper bainites? Okay, let me just explain into it. Very simply, the lower bainites are well discussed first. Lower bainites normally forms at temperature lower temperatures. Well, let me first tell you the bainitic transformations happens in a different way. If I take a steel sample, heat it up to about 950 degrees Celsius temperature and homogenize it, then I quench the steel to a oil bath, which is kept at about 350 to 400 degrees Celsius temperature, and then I quench it directly from the 950 or 1000 degrees Celsius temperature, in which the whole thing was fully austenitic state. So, if I quench it into the oil bath at about 350 to 400 Celsius temperature and keep it for a long time, 1 day, 2 days, then only I form the bainites. Now, lower means when the transformation happens at lower temperatures, like about 300, 350. Higher means about higher temperatures, about 450 or 400 degrees Celsius temperature. So, there are distinct morphological difference between these two. The one which is shown at the bottom is what is known as the lower bainite. Here you see here one picture is shown. This looks like a typical lamellar structure of perlite, but it is not. What we have is a long leaf, okay. That is what I discussed, very long leaf, in which this leaf is basically alpha phase. Whole leaf is basically supersaturated alpha phase, and then inside the leaves you have cementite precipitated out. Okay, that is what is the most critical difference of perlite and this most critical difference between bainite and the perlite. So, in perlite you have parallel lamellae of cementite alpha, but here you do not have that. What you have is a leaves of alpha, as you see here, leaves of alpha, and these leaves actually inside that leaves you have this carbides precipitated out. Okay, that is what is known as the lower bainite, and so on. What is upper bainite? Well, upper bainite is distinctly different. In upper bainite, what happens? You have, this is a grain boundary. This you see here, this is a grain boundary. As you see here, let me take these red color things, otherwise it is not visible. This is what is the grain boundary between this transform and untransformed region. This is gamma. So, as you see here, for upper bainite, you have this plates of alpha which is present, and on the sides of these plates these are the sides of these plates, these are actually cementite. So that means what? That means suppose this is what you see here, this is a big plate of alpha, and then this cementite has precipitated on the sides of the plates. You can see here all these are cementite plates, or you can see here much easily. So therefore distinctly these two morphologies are different. In this case you have alpha plates inside which cementite has precipitated out. In this case large number of alpha plates are present, and on the boundary between the two alpha plates the cementite is precipitates. So this is the difference between upper and lower bainites. Okay, so I am going to show you again. So this is the upper bainite. You see here there are many plates of alpha, and in between the plates there are cementite presence. Very clearly you can see here. Okay, these black things are cementites. Here you can see this is actually taken from the website of Professor Harry Badasia from Cambridge University. You can actually go down, because he worked a lot on these bainite transformations and has in fact made bainite useful in the real applications. So now question is this, this is what is your, this is the upper, this is the okay, sorry, I think I am making a mistake. Upper bainites will have these things. So I should go back here. This is what is your upper bainite. Okay, this is upper. Let me write, because whatever I said you should change now. This is the lower. So upper bainites will have this sheath like structure in which the carbide is precipitated out. Lower bainites will have plates of alpha, and the cementite is precipitated between the plates. So okay, as you see here very clearly, this is a TM picture. As you see here, this is a long sheath of this alpha, and inside which this cementite is precipitated out. This is what is your upper, and lower one you will have plates of alpha. These are the plates of alpha. These are, each one is alpha, and these things, black color thing is cementite. So cementite has precipitated the boundaries of alpha, not inside the alpha. That is a distinct difference. In case of upper bainite, cementite precipitated inside the alpha plates, alpha sheaths, but here this cementite is precipitated out in between the alpha plates. That is the difference between an upper and lower bainite. Okay, there are many pictures to be shown here, and you know how these things happens. Well, there are many theories for this formation of this austenite, formation of this bainite from austenite. So I am going to discuss only two things. Well, let me first tell you that paralytic transformation leads to also formation of alpha and F cementite together, and is in a lamellar morphology like this. Okay, and I have shown you this is, suppose this is austenite boundary, then cementite nucleates. As cementite requires more carbon, nearby region become depleted of carbon. This leads to formation of alpha on the both sides, and then you form a lamella, and then lamella grows and becomes perlite colonies. Now in case of upper bainite, you have a ferrite nucleus, okay, which is carbon enriched from the austenite, and because it is a carbon enriched from austenite, what will happen? And this is and this the ferrite grows. As the ferrite grows, this will eject all the carbon. So all the carbon will be then collected at the boundaries of austenite and this alpha. This is alpha, this is austenite. So at the boundaries between the alpha and austenite, all the carbon will be segregated, and when the carbon concentration will be very high, this will lead to the precipitation of the cementite. Similarly, nearby region there is another lamellae of another plates of alpha will form, and then again the carbon will be segregated at the boundaries of alpha and do that. On the other hand, for the lower bainites this does not happen. In lower bainites, initially the austenite transform into alpha, supersaturated alpha. Austenite, which is the high temperature phase, it directly transform into supersaturated alpha, and the alpha phase goes like a sheath or a tree leaves, and then at lower temperature because the supersaturated phase alpha, this cementite precipitates on the inside these sheaths. That is how the things happens, and this is what is shown. First you form the coherent alpha from the austenite, and then once it forms large number of coherent alpha phase, and then the supersaturated alpha will be leading to the formation of precipitation of the carbide phase in the microstructure. There are many details of this which I think we can discuss in the next class in details, but in a nutshell I just like to tell you the bainite is basically a distinctly different transformation, as not same as paralytic transformation as you might be thinking, but it is not. A lot of studies has been done for the last 30-40 years, and it has been conclusively shown that this is not completely governed by the diffusion of carbon or completely governed by the shearing of the shearing due to formation leading to formation of martensites. So, it is in between these two, it looks like, but still a lot of research to be done, and then only we can find out what is the way things done. So, the next class we will discuss remaining part of Bainite, and then I need to discuss about these TTT diagrams, and subsequently I need to discuss about the cast errands.